On January 4th, 1960, the silence of a small French village was broken by a deafening crash. A horrible wreckage was found at the scene. A beautiful sports car had swerved off the icy road and collided fatally against a tree. Inside the car was one of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century. Albert Camus was dead. He was traveling back to Paris after spending the holidays in the south of France. He was supposed to take the train home, and in fact he already had his ticket in his pocket. But at the last moment, he accepted a ride with his friend and publisher Michel Gallimard in Gallimard's new luxury sports car. Along the route, the car skidded on icy pavement and slammed into the tree at high speed, killing Camus on impact. When firefighters arrived at the scene, they discovered a leather satchel containing the manuscript of an unfinished work. Fragments of a novel that Camus believed would be his magnum opus. It was about a boy growing up in poverty in Algeria, shaped by tragedy but aspiring towards the light. It was about Camus' own childhood, and it would show us the roots of Camus' philosophy of absurdity, rebellion, and human dignity in the face of all of it. And it begins not in the fancy cafes or theaters of Paris, but in a cramped tenement in Belcourt, Algiers. Albert Camus was born on November 7, 1913, in Mondovi, a small town in French Algeria. His father Lucien, a farm laborer of Alsatian descent, was drafted into World War I. Lucien died at the Battle of Marne when Albert was just 11 months old. His mother, Catherine Sintes, was of Spanish descent. She was almost entirely illiterate and partially deaf. She earned meager wages as a cleaning woman, scrubbing floors for wealthy families. She spoke very little, often communicating more with gestures than words. Camus once said that she was the silent center of his life. The family moved to the working-class district of Belcourt in Algiers, where they lived with his grandmother. Their apartment was bare and dimly lit. Poverty was constant and intense. Meals of mostly bread and soup, no running water, little furniture. His grandmother was strict to the point of cruelty, beating the children for small mistakes and running the household with a tight and iron fist. Home was sad, silent, and lonely for little Albert. But school was a different world. It was bright and full of possibilities. Little Albert was brilliant. He devoured books and wrote at an advanced level. His elementary school teacher, Louis Germain, quickly noticed Albert's potential and encouraged him immensely. He also saw a responsibility to the children who lost their fathers in the war. As he would say, "I fought the war with their fathers and survived. I try at least here to take the place of my dead comrades." School was a sanctuary for Albert, and Germain was his guardian. However, around the time he was 11, reality hit hard. Albert's grandmother pushed for him to leave school and become a manual laborer. She believed that school was a waste of time and wanted Albert to immediately start contributing to the family financially. Albert had all but resigned himself to his fate. And like so many young boys from poor families in Algiers, he would have been lost to the docks or the fields. But much like the philosophy that would come to define him, Albert's life changed because of an individual's decision to challenge fate. His teacher, Louis Germain, refused to let Albert slip away. He believed in Albert's potential before anyone else could and stood by him. He gave him extra lessons after class, prepared him for the scholarship exam, and even persuaded his grandmother to let him stay in school. With Germain's help, Albert won a scholarship to the prestigious secondary school in Algiers. After he won the scholarship, everyone was happy for Albert, but Albert himself was sad. As he writes in the fragments discovered at the crash site, he looked out at his teacher as he was leaving, waved at him one last time, and instead of the joy of success, a child's immense anguish wrung his heart, as if he knew in advance that this success had just uprooted him from the warm and innocent world of the poor to be hurtled into a strange world, one no longer his, and from now on he would have to learn to understand without help and become a man without the aid of the one man who had rescued him, his beloved teacher. Despite his fears, the poor child from Belcourt gathered his courage and stepped into the world of philosophy, literature, and the ideas that would shape him. And the rest is history. To understand Camus' later philosophy, one must also understand the influence of his household and his teacher. His grandmother, authoritarian and severe, would instill in him an early awareness of constraint. She demanded obedience and punished harshly, shaping Camus' sensitivity to authority and injustice. In her severity lay the seeds of his distrust of rigid power structures, whether colonial governments or totalitarian ideologies. His mother, on the other hand, embodied quiet resilience. She could not read the words her son wrote, nor follow the philosophical arguments he crafted, but she was his anchor. He described her as possessing a silent courage that gave meaning to existence even in the absence of wealth or recognition. She represented in living form the dignity of the ordinary human being, a dignity that Camus would champion in his novels and essays. Camus' philosophy, articulated in works like The Myth of Sisyphus and The Rebel, might seem abstract, but it was firmly rooted in real experience. His childhood had taught him three truths. The first was the reality of suffering. Poverty was not an idea, it was a daily fact. Hunger, deprivation, and humiliation were part of life. This gave him a profound sympathy for the downtrodden throughout his life. The second was the beauty of the world. The sea, the sun, the Algerian landscape, football, philosophy all offered unmitigated joy that required nothing but the will to participate. And the third was the saving power of individual decisions. His teacher's intervention demonstrated how human solidarity could alter fate. His idea of rebellion against absurdity at some level had to have been grounded in the memory of Louis Germain's decision to stand by him. These experiences coalesced into Camus' distinctive outlook. Life is absurd, marked by suffering and the inevitability of death, yet it can be embraced with joy, solidarity, and revolt against injustice. Unlike many philosophers, Camus did not construct his vision in isolation. It was carved out of his earliest encounters with poverty, beauty, and human kindness. In 1957, when Camus was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature, he was only 44 years old, one of the youngest ever to receive the honor. For the boy who had grown up in silence and poverty, this recognition was extraordinary. But instead of basking in the glory, Camus remembered the figure who had made it possible. He wrote to his old, beloved school teacher, Louis Germain, and said, "When I heard the news, my first thought after my mother was of you. Without you, without the affectionate hand you extended to a poor little child that I was, without your teaching and example, none of all this would have happened. I don't make too much of this kind of honor, but at least it gives me the chance to tell you what you have meant and still mean to me." This letter is one of the most touching documents in the history of literature, a testament not just to a writer's gratitude, but to the profound, life-changing influence a teacher can have. The manuscript found in Camus' satchel after the crash was a return to his roots. The unfinished novel was about Jacques Comrie, a thinly veiled version of Camus himself, growing up in Algeria, raised by a silent mother, guided by a teacher. The book was meant to be the first of a new, more personal cycle of writing, one that would bridge philosophy and autobiography. In its fragments, readers glimpse the continuation of Camus' lifelong quest to reconcile the deafening silence of the universe on the question of meaning with the persistence of human dignity and meaning-making in the face of the absurd. The very fact that he died with that manuscript beside him feels symbolic. He was returning at the end to the beginning, to the child who escaped from home to sit in the sun-drenched classroom of Louis Germain. That same year of Camus' passing, Louis Germain also passed away. It was as if his arc that had joined their lives, the teacher who opened the door, the student who walked through it, both closed in the same season. Camus' manuscript found in the car wreckage stayed locked away for more than 30 years. And then finally, in 1994, Catherine Camus, his daughter, prepared it for publication. She edited the fragments with care, presenting it as her father had left it, unfinished but alive with memory. On the first page of the book was a dedication to the very heart of his life. It said, "To you, who will never be able to read this book." This was addressed by Albert to his mother Catherine Sintes, the silent, strong, and illiterate woman who had shaped his existence, yet could not read the words he wrote. But in another way, the dedication also became true for his daughter. Catherine Camus gave her life to preserving her father's work, yet he could never read the edition she pieced together. She made the book whole for him, just as he had tried to write it whole for his mother. In both directions, the words were carried across a silence that could not be crossed in life. Camus' meditations on life and death in the book would feel prophetic. He writes, "He had tried to escape from anonymity, from a life that was poor, ignorant, and mulish. He could not live that life of blind patience, without words, without thought beyond the present. He had traveled far and wide, had built, had created, had loved, and his days had been full to overflowing." And another line in the book that would seem prophetic. All that was left for him was to love his own death. With this manuscript, which became the book The First Man, Camus gives us the final glimpse into his life's work. It's not a theory, it's not a system, it was a life. A boy who found in poverty both tragedy and beauty, and who made from that contradiction a philosophy of human courage, striving, and the affirmation of life right till the very end. And that is the end of this video. I'll see you in the next one.